let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Paige Sharp. I'm our Director of Development and Talent here at the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us for the final program in our quarterly LunchVox series on Frontline Retail. The 2021 LunchVox Quarterly Series is sponsored by Chambers Construction. We thank you for your investment in these programs, and I would like to introduce you to Joy Pendowski, the Director of Marketing and Business Development for Chambers Construction, for just a few remarks this morning.
Thank you, Paige, and welcome everybody. The conversations that we're having through the LunchVox series, in our view, are vital to the betterment of our community, and today's no exception. The topic of workforce and supply chain issues, it's timely, it's relevant, we're all feeling it in our respective industries. So I don't have much more to say other than that. I hope you all enjoy today's program, and on behalf of Chambers Construction, thank you for showing up and being part of the conversation.
Thanks, Joy. All right, a reminder to everyone, this meeting is being recorded. I'm sure you heard the loud announcement from Zoom here just a minute ago. We'll be sending out the recording to everyone who's been registered for this program, and we'll also make it available through our YouTube channel. During the presentations today, please keep your audio muted unless I call on you to ask a question. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put those in the chat, or when we get to the end of our panel discussion, we're going to be opening up the floor for further discussion with all of you. And if you want to use the raise hand function in Zoom, you're welcome to do that, and we'll call on you. If you're able to keep your video on, though, during the presentations, we do encourage you to do so. Before I turn it over to today's facilitator, our fearless leader and CEO, Bonnie Mickelson, it's my pleasure to introduce our three panelists. So first we have Celeste Wong, founder and CEO and designer and watchmaker at Celeste Watch Company. She's a biomedical engineer and one of only 2 women-owned and operated watch companies in the United States. Todd Edman is the co-founder of Bitcork and Pollinate Foods. Todd's a lifelong entrepreneur. He and his co-founders invented the Apple AirTag for food, which I hope he explains a little bit more to us what that means in a bit. He brings inventory and transparency to the industry and allowing companies to collaborate on transport and other critical services. And finally, we have Scott Lindstrom, Chief Operating Officer at Jerry's Home Improvement Centers. Scott began his career at Jerry's in 1984. Loading building materials in a lumberyard at an original store on Highway 99 in Eugene. Scott's worked nearly every position in the company over the past 37 years and earned his current role in 2019. Thank you, Celeste, Todd, and Scott for being here today to discuss some really important issues facing many industries today, supply chain and workforce issues. Bonnie, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Paige. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Really excited. Got a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. I'd like to start off with Scott, if you will. Tell us something we don't know, maybe, about Jerry's. Tell us about your business and throw in a fascinating or fun fact if you have one for us.
Okay, well, all right. We have just briefly overviews. We have 2 stores in Eugene and Springfield. We are 100% owned by our employees. The Orem family sold the business to the employees in 2010. We have about 525 team members right now. We're a seasonal business, so we increase our size of our stores starting about March. Stores until about October. We add about 200 people during that time, so we peak out a little over 700 team members. Our stores are fairly large format. They're 130,000 square foot under one roof with a lumberyard, drive-through lumberyard, as well as an outdoor garden center at each store. We carry about 60,000 items in our store, and our chief competition only carries about 40. So our objective was to stock more than our competition based on what our customers were wanting. So our customer wanted more products. We built bigger stores. So that's what we did. And let's see, our customer base is whoever comes in our doors, we view as our customers. And we're about 65% of our customers are do-it-yourselfers. People like to build projects and work on projects themselves. 35% are contractors and business people. Let's see, a fun fact. A fun fact could be, when I started in 1984, our entire store could fit in our tool department in our Springfield store. That's it.
Well, that is a fun and fascinating fact. And you have 2 stores in Eugene, Springfield, and I don't know anyone who doesn't know Jerry's. And part of that is, Scott, because I believe there is not one fundraiser or community or auction or something that Jerry's doesn't have a presence in. And I just want to thank you on behalf of many of us in the business community for your generosity. And
you're certainly welcome.
Commitment.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you, Scott. So Celeste, your turn. Tell us about Celeste and Celeste watches.
Well, we're celebrating right now, and we have been celebrating for a little while because in the beginning of this year, I got the trademark for Celeste to put Celeste on all jewelry in the United States. It was huge. I worked on it for years. And finally, the company that had Celeste on jewelry before went out of business. And I petitioned the courts and we were able to get the trademark. And of course, you know, all this was going through right when COVID really hit last year in March when it started. And so it took us about a year, but we got it. So that's really exciting because that enables me to open up new markets. So Celeste Watch Company, just in case somebody doesn't know, we do bespoke watches, really. We do custom watches. They're art dials. So they're about having a watch that where telling time is actually secondary to the art. Like that's why Bonnie can wear hers without a battery in it. And so I used to, my model for selling when I first started was to travel to fine art festivals up and down the coast. And then, you know, COVID hit. And so it was a really big deal to scramble and try to open up new markets, figure out new ways to sell the watches. And so the trademark is very important because watches are counterfeit so much, you can't get into a big box store, for example, like Amazon. I'm selling on Amazon now. If you go to amazon.com/Celeste, it's me. But I couldn't get that without having the trademark. I can't get into Macy's or Nordstrom's or really build the business into a national brand. So it's a huge, huge thing. And I'm kind of running as fast as I can just to keep up with it now, which is exciting. You know, there's so much more I could say, but I'm not
Yep.
sure.
No, we got lots of questions for you, Celeste. So thank you. That's fabulous. I was just putting on my Celeste watch. I got to find the camera. And is this, as you mentioned, the best selling of your watches? See how beautiful that is?
That is the best selling one. It's
Yeah.
called Rise. It's actually a tree, an abalone shell that's inlaid in mother of pearl. It's quite beautiful.
And this isn't a commercial, but I tell you what, it's fascinating, your business and your business model. We'll get back to that and how you've been able to shift and actually find new markets, Celeste. And I'm just thrilled that you have a storefront and a showroom where you actually create many of the watches, as I understand, right there, design and create them in downtown Springfield on the 300 block. So thank you, Celeste. And we'll be back. Todd. All right, Todd, the big question I have besides, you know, tell us about your business is how's that Buick Skylark coming along?
It's coming along nicely. I built my first electronic component into it, which was a microcontroller controlled garage door opener. And I'm also mechanically, it's doing quite nicely. So, you know, it's coming along.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, I'll look for it parked in downtown Springfield as you do your, I don't know, holiday shopping or something.
Right.
All right, Todd. So tell us about what you're doing. I mean, you're disrupting some traditional supply chain. Just tell us about that.
It's really going to sound like hubris. I mean, it you know what the vision of our company is, and I'm embarrassed sometimes to talk about it, but we're working on a couple of problems like world hunger, carbon miles for food, and food sustainability issues that exist around the planet and even locally. And how we're doing that, we actually looked at the food infrastructure and are telling the story of a head of lettuce. You know, if you look at a head of lettuce, it costs 35 cents to grow that head of lettuce. It costs 40 cents to transport that head of lettuce from where it's grown on average 1,000 to 2,000 miles, where it will be consumed inside the United States. And then it costs 75 cents for that head of lettuce to actually make its way from that distribution warehouse into the retail store. And then the retail store marks it up 50%. So when you look at that, like it's distribution, driving the lettuce, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 miles and bringing it to the store is by far the biggest cost in the supply chain. And that just doesn't seem to make sense. But the reality is the reason it does make sense is because of economies of scale. What economies of scale are: high utilization. So when you think about high utilization, you think about, you know, trucks being used all the time, but really in food, it's the highest utilization is labor. And what warehouses are places for people to go to work and perform tasks, right? That's what warehouses are. And when Elon Musk went to the World Bank and said, like, hey, will $6 billion really solve world hunger? I'm pretty sure the answer to that was no, because he knows what we know, which is that the barrier to world hunger, the barrier to local economies and food systems, is trillions of dollars of infrastructure that have been built over decades in our country and in other countries that service this supply chain. The economics dictate that everyone getting together in a warehouse to do the delivery are the most economically effective way. And that's why we have the food supply chain we have. So all these problems go back to those base economics. That's the piece, Bonnie, that we're changing, that we're disrupting. We took a test where we took our Bitcork, a little device that goes onto a wine bottle, and it controls what gets delivered. So what I mean by that is when you think about Uber, one of the things Uber did is eliminate storage for taxi cabs. How did they do that? Well, they allowed individuals to respond to a signal and drive their car where it needed to be. So we don't need garages for taxi cabs anymore. It's one of the things Uber delivered. Uber's got one problem solved that we have that a lot of food businesses don't solve, is that the package puts itself in your car, and when you arrive at the destination, it gets itself out and wanders away, right? It's a human being, it can do that. Food products can't. But through the use of this Bitcork, our last mile warehouse, which is 500 square feet, allows a bike carrier to show up and pick one package off the shelf. So what we've effectively done is taken the distribution warehouse for a wine distributor, which is usually 20,000 or 100,000 or 300,000 square feet. And we've been able to eliminate it and put it close to where food is supposed to go. So in doing that, I'm replacing hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of infrastructure just in our test pilot. Now that we've built that system, we're giving it to food companies. So we're going to food companies and working with them and allowing them to share that exchange and that information so that they can actually build up their own delivery networks and get regional delivery of their food products at the fraction of the cost of traditional distribution. And that's the network that we're building right now. So to circle back, now you're in a developing country, you don't need billions of dollars of infrastructure to deliver food anymore. You can actually coordinate that with software and one little affordable hardware device that can replace billions of dollars of infrastructure. And so that's actually what we're working on changing, is building this as a format worldwide for how people exchange food. And we're starting it right here in Eugene.
Or in Eugene, and you are currently working with your clients where, Todd? Across the state?
Eugene, Springfield, and Portland are our 200-ish restaurants that we work with. And then the clients that we're working with primarily to adopt are in Los Angeles and also here in Eugene. So Los Angeles was like proving it would work in a big city, and it's working very well. And you know, the regional location here is we're just building up the network here. So we're working with Grizzly Foods, Elegant Elephant, and a couple of other companies to kind of take over this last mile, help them drive this last mile delivery piece through the network.
Fabulous. Okay, I'm going to come back to a couple thoughts on that, Todd. I want to remind everyone, as you're listening in, if you have some thoughts, remember when you're watching TV and an interviewer is interviewing a guest that you're really interested in, and you don't get the chance to ask the question, you like, why aren't you asking them this? This is your chance. So I promise you, we will get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. Just pop them in the chat box, or if you want to remain anonymous, send one to Paige and she'll let us know. So let's go back to sort of ground zero. I wish I had invited, by the way, the UN to this conversation, Todd. Maybe that's a reminder for next time.
Yeah, or I'll talk to Elon Musk about it later. It'll be
Okay. Yeah, him too. Might as well. Here we are. We're so well into the second year, going on 2 years of the pandemic, and we all have experienced in different ways, both personally and in our business and professional life, the major disruptions to the way we do business. But in terms of retail, we're hearing a lot about, maybe you're seeing this, the shifts or trends in consumer spending. So what are you seeing? And also, what are you watching specifically going into sort of this holiday season where generally things look even, the demand grows in normal times? Does anybody want to raise their hand and start off and answer that? Scott, Celeste? No? Okay, raise my hand. Scott, you're on, Scott.
Well, we're not seeing, trend wise, we're not saving the world hunger problems. We're trying to improve people's lives through providing products and advice to people through improving their homes, and we believe that's a big part of what we do. So this is compared to what Todd's doing. We're selling home improvements. Okay, but we love
you
this
guys
business.
have been doing it really well for years. We're just getting it, started.
So what we're doing is, we're seeing this time of year, and the trend has not been. I'll just give you a brief thing. During COVID, everybody stayed home, and when they stayed home, the first month of the pandemic, about April, we saw almost all of our categories in our store went down in business. But shortly after that, it went nuts, and coupled with that, there was, and we're going to talk about supply chain stuff here in a little bit, but coupled with that was the supply chain started to show up in about April or March or May of 2020. But regardless of that, what we're seeing right now for us and our business right now, we're heading into our Christmas holiday season, and we were concerned about the supply chain issues around holiday decorations, which we tried to do up our stores and have lots of stuff available for people to jazz up their houses. And I was really worried about it. Some of our product was stuck out in Long Beach. We didn't think we were going to get it, but
Long Beach.
we did end up getting most of our stuff, and not everything. So we do have a pretty decent supply of Christmas decorations and stuff that people love to fix up their homes with. Also, this time of year, before the Thanksgiving holiday, Christmas holidays, people do a few things inside their home. They spruce up with paint and flooring, mostly flooring, and we're seeing a lot of flooring right now going out. And lucky for us is that supply chain problems on vinyl, luxury vinyl flooring and luxury vinyl tile are not impacted. We've got a good supply of that. Also, heading into the Christmas season, we have our tool business. That's our peak tool business season. Our buyer has been buying. I think he started buying really early because he was afraid about supply chain. So we've been building our inventories up in tools probably since August, September, and we have a really good tool supply for the Christmas holiday season. Other than that, we can talk about supply chain issues when we get to that point. And I've got quite a bit. I had somebody draw this up. It's quite a pile, unfortunately.
We'll be back to you, Scott.
Yeah.
All right.
Celeste, what about in your case? Are you seeing changes, shifts to the better, to the more challenging aspects? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have also been having supply chain issues. For example, all my movements that power the watches come from Switzerland. And I was running out of those and I thought, oh, I'll order early. And it's a really good thing because normally they take a month to get here and it took 4 months. I was absolutely out of movements by the time they arrived. And that, when I say out, I mean, I used the last one the day before they came in. And so supply has been a big deal. I had this, so I was doing an MBA in entrepreneurship quite a while ago. And I had this professor, and he used to say every time that the one thing that takes down a small business more so than anything else is when the owner changes their lifestyle. So you do well a couple years and then you go buy a new house and you have suddenly these new demands on you, and then something like a pandemic hits. I mean, he didn't say a pandemic was going to hit, but it was so clear to me what he was talking about. And if I hadn't taken that to heart and lived that all these years, I probably would have gone out of business, because with the supply chain issues, and I'm so small, I'm one person. I have one person that helps me, but really I do everything else on my own, is that it enabled me to go, oh, this is going to be a problem. So maybe instead of 500 movements right now, I order 1,000. And so, yeah, I might have them for longer in inventory than I should, but maybe not, because we don't really know what's going to happen. I don't know how soon I can get some more. And so having just a little bit of cash reserves has really made a huge difference. I mean, really, really huge. As far as people and their attitudes and things, one of the things that happens in my business around the holidays is that I get a lot of custom orders. Everybody wants, their grandma's dog on the watch for Christmas, or something like that, or whatever it is. And this year people are doing it sooner, which is really, really nice for me. Last year, I think it was the first week in December, I had like 8 people come to me, and I'm like, whoa, it's going to be hard to finish everything. I know 8 people doesn't sound like very much, but the watches take a long time. And so this year, I've had maybe 20 people, and they started last month. So it's been really nice for me. I like that that's gone better. As far as the street in Springfield, though, I would say my traffic is less than normal.
Mm-hmm.
Just people walking around. People aren't really just walking around anymore.
And does that impact your business, Celeste? Or are you in a place now where you're less reliant on the foot traffic and the walk-in?
I would say that since I opened in 2017 here,
Mm-hmm.
This business could have never made it on foot traffic. We wouldn't have been able to pay the bills. So there's always been multiple streams of income to make it work.
So that was part of your business model.
That's
starting
right.
up.
Yeah.
Okay. So that wasn't something that you shifted or had to. That was part of your plan.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't know it was going to be so important, but I knew within a year it was going to be really important. So it has been. Online has gotten better and better. And now, like I said, I'm on Amazon. I still do some festivals too, but just not very many.
Great. Thank you, Celeste. Todd, did you have anything on that topic of particular? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, you've seen in restaurants, a lot of the large companies that do, like Cisco and US Foods, they've just altogether stopped delivering to some restaurants that don't place big enough orders. And that's been like a real problem. So on top of the pandemic and on top of not being able to hire people, you've got restaurants over in Florence who just can't possibly order enough to attract a Cisco truck or a US Foods truck. And, you've got other vendors, that restaurants that do $1 million or $2 million a year here in Eugene that, used to order 30-40% of their stuff from, or less from US Foods. And now the truck won't even stop at their restaurants. They're having to resource those. And a lot of those things that they're trying to resource from other spots in the food supply chain because of those shortages, those products just aren't available. And, you think about how the supply chain is constructed. We talk about it as a chain, but it's much more like a pipe. There's sets of pipes, and each industry kind of uses its own pipes to get things through to the end locations where they're sold. And especially in food, you saw this where you had warehouses at the start of the pandemic in LA that literally were full of rotting food that was supposed to go to restaurants, and next door, warehouses that were supposed to go to retail locations that, grocery stores and stuff that were empty, and they couldn't get truck drivers and they couldn't get trucks. And the place next door literally had trucks sitting in the yard unused. And that's actually, that scarcity's caused some dependence and consumer shifts in what they buy. So there's this thing, the local food movement in 2019 was about $10 billion. The projection is by the end of 2022, it'll be $40 billion.
Wow.
And you're talking about, a $30 billion swing. Walmart in their craziest year didn't grow $30 billion in grocery. So like we're these aren't small shifts. These are like incredibly profound shifts in people's preference on, wanting to know better and have more identity and know more about the food they want to eat and where it comes from. And so it really is, ironically, feast or famine for a lot of local food companies.
So I want to, I mentioned the U.S. Federation, U.S. Chamber Federation phone call this morning. And I want to piggyback on what you're saying, Todd, and see if this is, it seems to me that they were talking about the supply chain issue and the backlog and the log jam in the ports down in California, and what are the solutions. And the premise is that there were problems, significant inefficiencies logistically and a number of other ways in the ports already pre-pandemic. And this just sort of completely exacerbated the problem. In fact, they're now recommending a couple of things, the US Chamber at the federal level, some even National Guard to come in and help shift some of the empty containers over to relocate them, to start moving them out, but they're in sort of over their head, it seems. But are we going to see significant shifts in our infrastructure? Like you mentioned, our, food chain or food distribution infrastructure. Is this something, and are solutions like yours going to scale? Are we going to see them scale more because they are solving for a problem that we can't otherwise solve for, that's too big for just, an infrastructure?
I mean, Vonnie, that's a great question. And internationally, unquestionably, in the United States and in Europe too, the question to that is yes. One of the predominant technologies that's emerged over the last decade was digital freight forwarding, which is basically replacing the role of freight brokers with software. And so when you look at the breakdown of labor costs in a freight company, you would go, well, okay, 90% of those are going to be moving things. And you're like, yeah, actually, no. 10 years ago, it was like 60% was actually like filing the paperwork and dealing with all of the things around just like administratively handling freight.
Right.
And these digital freight forwarding companies grew tremendously over the last like 5 years. But when the pandemic hit, they really filled a niche because, you couldn't get those freight forwarding people into work at the brokers, and you couldn't get, people in. And so people were looking for sources like, how do I even book my freight now? And so a lot of people adopted those freight forwarding companies, and 3 of those freight forwarding companies were sold to other or bought either traditional freight companies or bought arms of other freight companies. There's a ton of M&A all over. I mean, you have Uber Freight Europe, which was a relatively small business that, wasn't even doing $100 million in freight forwarding, that got sold for 1.1 billion. And you're seeing the realignment of freight to be a more software-driven, digitally driven thing, so it can be more responsive. Now, the ports have other problems, and the designs of the ports, because there's still like this total and complete dependence on, like, I want to move my things to these types of stores, so I have to use this short-term broker book my container and my pickup at the port. And those are manual efficiencies that there are very few digital versions of yet. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the constriction.
Boy, so those of you who are listening, now you know why we put the three of these individuals on this panel. So different and yet so integrated in thought process and challenges and solutions. Scott, going back to you on the supply chain, we had a brief conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you were mentioning just a couple of things that you're doing to address sort of the challenges that you have in a business, a locally owned, small or medium-sized business. Can you touch on some of those? What are you finding is solving for the problem, and what are you watching that you need to do maybe going forward or looking to do, or maybe you have something?
I'll try to I'll address that. And all the reasons. Well, I don't know if everybody knows the reasons why they're, but I think Todd already explained some of them. But we like it or not, we have to home improvement. We have to buy container loads overseas. There's not a lot of domestic producers for the products we have, at least people are willing to pay. And so we were having to do that. Our container costs for shipping from China was $3,000 a container in 2019 pre-pandemic. Those containers today are $24,000. $24,000.
How do you even absorb that?
Well, you get to pay for it.
Yeah.
It goes into the cost of goods.
Yeah.
It's not unfortunately it's hitting everybody. So Jerry's doesn't set the retail prices in the market. Home Depot does, and so they're moving things along pretty quick, and they're covering their bases and they're covering their costs. So they're we're fortunate that we're able to bring them in still, but the cost is ridiculous, and there's lots of reasons. There's labor shortages at the docks. There's container shortages in themselves. You can't even get containers, and there's a supply chain issue there.
Right.
As far as us, we're affiliated with distribution with Ace Hardware, and there's another big company called Orgill. They're out of Memphis, but they have distribution centers all over the country. They're very large, and they're becoming one of the largest distributions for home improvement products. Another one is True Value right in Springfield, and another company up in Spokane called Jensen, which is still somewhat affiliated with Ace Hardware. Each of these companies supply, get their own products in and stock the warehouses. What Jerry's had to do, we had each of our products that we carry have a main supplier, and when the supply shortage hit, we had to figure out how in the world we're going to get this product in stock. We pride ourselves on having full shelves, and it's very difficult when you're having, a single supplier running out, and they're shipping. Suppliers right now are shipping at between 65 and 75%, where before pandemic, they were shipping at 95% to 99%. And our in-stock position prior to COVID was about 90, we'd like to be 1% out at any one time. So we were like 99, 98% of the stuff were in stock. So what we did is we added distribution. We weren't associated with True Value. We added True Value, and we're looking at other companies right now. So somebody's out of a particular hammer. That particular hammer is out at Ace, but I could go get it at Orgill. We go get it, and we spend most of our time and purchasing things that run out through juggling distribution, and it's very time consuming. We have, I think we have 12 people working on this right now, just trying to keep things going. That's the main issue, is not the main issue, that's how we're able to keep as much on the shelves as we possibly can. Labor shortages for our own selves has been a challenge. It actually didn't really hit us until around July or August of this year. We were fine up until that time of staffing. I don't know what happened, but somehow, some way that the market became very tough to get people. In fact, in July, we had one applicant. We usually get 200 a month. We had one applicant, which is really strange. So something happened in that particular time period. We had, some other supply chain issues. We had lumber and building materials, particularly lumber and plywood, went sky high up in March and April. Actually, it was in May, excuse me. It was in May of this year. And pre-May, I think you could pick a 4x8 sheet of OSB up for about $15. By May, you're looking at closer to $60 per sheet. Some people thought it was Jerry's doing this. We were not doing this. We had no control over that. The mills had control. They had labor issues in the Midwest. There were huge home building was going crazy. People were building homes, and so drove the price way out of line. It's now back to around $25 for a sheet. It's back. It's not back pre-increase, but it's coming back around. But we're still seeing shortages in allocations on drywall, insulation, siding, and plastic and asphalt roofing, which is again, that's probably lots of reasons around all that. Most of it is raw materials. We have other issues that we're dealing with. The freezes and the hurricanes in the south caused huge shortages in resin, anything with resin or plastic in it, parts, pieces, pipe, plastic furniture, and you can name it. It's very hard to get.
So Scott, let me ask you, when you start to see those, and I imagine at least the last couple of years, it hasn't been part of your predictions or projections and whatnot. What do you do? Do you just lose a lot of sleep over it? Do you hire more people to help you? Do you call, I don't know, a friend?
Call a friend.
Walk us through that.
Phone a friend. That's what we do. Oh, we have a lot of smart people working for us that are agile and can think and do things and be creative. And I think a lot about getting supplies about people taking initiative and with the idea that we're all here to get product for our customers to buy. And we've had to be creative. There's no doubt about it. It hasn't been easy because along with the supply chains, everybody knows it. It's been very difficult dealing with the mask mandates, the on and off mask mandates, OSHA regulations. It's been very challenging for us. And so coupled with all that, it's been an incredible 2 years. And every day, Brian and my vice president of stores, we come in and say, what's new today? Because it's like every day we come in, there's something new that we have to go deal with. And we actually start every morning off, what's the new thing? There's a lot of new stuff going on that we're dealing with, and a lot of it is not good. So I just say that we do add staff. We add more buyers, more purchasing people. We consolidated our processes and procedures to try to make it simplified. But that's the kind of stuff we do.
That's an important question. You always got to find the right question. So today's question, today's takeaway is what's new today? That's the advice. What's new today? I'm just going to read a couple comments here. Celeste, a lot of folks love you and your watches, and a lot of those folks are on the meeting. So another shout out to Celeste. Sid writes, people think of the California migration to other states as being tech companies. A large migration have been truck drivers whom have left California in droves and now drive in places like Texas. This has also caused the container industry to reroute from Long Beach to Houston. So it's kind of interesting reflection. Thank you for that. Sid. Let's see. I'm not seeing any more questions yet. Oh, here we got a question. Yes, just in time for Todd. Todd, this comes from Sid. With your business model, do you see yourself using more of the digital asset banking over traditional banking to increase your market share?
Absolutely. I think, when you're talking about digital banking or digital currency, blockchain type technologies, there's a ton of the type of transactions especially in the small food market. And by the way, when I say small food, I mean companies under $100 million, that's small food. And those companies, there's a million of those companies in the United States that produce food. So like more like Nancy's yogurt or stuff like that. Those make up about 90% by the dollar value of all food. So when I say small food, that's kind of what I'm talking about. And when I think about the difficulty and the types of things that these businesses are dealing with in the supply chain, they're looking for any sort of solution to the sets of problems that they've got. And a lot of what they're doing is supporting each other. So they're like, can I hold my goods at your warehouse? Do you guys have any of that? These are like peer-to-peer transactions that, you know, you wouldn't send a bill.com bill for half a pound of butter to the guy who works next door for you. And I think a lot of the DeFi movement and the restructuring of financial transactions is being propelled, that's happening, is being propelled forward by the different types of transactions people are performing. And so I think, you know, it is going to be a while before food fully embraces that. That's why, you know, we're not building out a DeFi blockchain platform that allows small vendors to exchange, you know, money for transport or transit, but it is an incredibly good use case. And on the back end, you're seeing a lot of these digital freight companies are making place in that space to put transport. And then there's a company here in Eugene or in Oregon that's working on a movement to try and record provenance or where stuff comes from onto a blockchain. And you start looking at that and go, well, when you start to source what products are out there, you can just go and look and see who grows it, which is very different than calling a distributor, and it solves a different set of problems. So, you know, will that happen like right now? No, but I think that it is, the pandemic has made it inevitable in this space.
Fascinating. Thanks, Todd. So we got a good overview from Scott about solutions from a larger business perspective on some of these supply chain and meeting consumer demand with everything else going on. Celeste, I have a question for you. Can you talk more about the creative solutions that you've explored for those micro businesses like yours, for a bit, very small business like it? You started out with a really solid plan and a commitment, and for goodness sakes, you're a biomedical engineer, right? So, and how that translates to watchmaking, that's for you to explain to us. But there are some, what kind of creative problem solving have been most, I think, maybe successful for you as in your journey of the last 4 years, if that's about how long you've been doing it?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I've been doing this. I sold my first watch in 2015. So we're on 6 years now.
So 6 years.
I've had the store open for 4 years. So you're right. You're right about that. Really, I would say that every single thing about this business is creative. I don't feel like I could actually make it if I wasn't just flat out creative about every single solution every day. And well, first of all, I was the first woman-owned and operated watch company in the US. And then on top of that, nobody else is doing this. There was no model. So I see one of the questions is about single source supplies. And yes, that's a big deal. Well, for example, I was buying the shell. So I use mother of pearl and abalone. Did anybody know there's 100 different types of abalone? I had no idea, but I know of all the things you learn doing this. So I started working with this guy on the East Coast. He calls himself the Duke of Pearl. The Duke makes it his mission to go around the world and look for scrap abalone shell from fishing boats. That's all he does. So all the abalone shell is sustainable, which is really cool for me, because that's what's, one of my values is that I didn't want abalone fished out so that I could make watches. Well, anyway, so he goes all over the world. He finds these exotic abalone shells and he prepares them for guitar luthiers, cuts them into sheets. And so I take what is normally given to a guitar luthier and thin it down even more for a watch dial. And I have to say it's endlessly creative to figure out how to do that. And on all of these watches, just as an example, is that I would love to say I take a design like yours, Bonnie, Rise, and the mother of pearl that's on the back. I would love to say that I put it in the laser cutter and it cuts the same way every single time, but it doesn't. The shell from different parts of the world has different calcium deposits. Some parts are thinner, some parts are thicker. It just, every single time I start with a new piece of shell, it's a whole new, you've got to dial it in, to make it work. And so it's a really big deal where I get my shell from. And I was working with the Duke all these years, and then all of a sudden the Duke's not really traveling anymore because of COVID. And oh no, what am I going to do? And I find that there's a lady in Florida who sells shell, but she doesn't prepare it like I like. And it's a whole bunch more processing for me. And then I find there's a place in Hawaii. Well, they sell some shell, but they don't have the right colors. And so it's constant. I feel like almost every business right now with what we're doing, there's a scramble to try to keep ahead of what's going to be available and what's not. And then how much do you order and will they have that much? And then like hearing about that container ship from $3,000 to $24,000, you know, it makes me feel bad about complaining about, you know, the $600 I paid to get something here one time. and how much import taxes. Like I sent I sent 2 watches to a woman in Mexico just the other day. And I put a valuation on it of $300. And I got a bill back saying that customs and taxes to get into Mexico was $1,326. I'm just like, and the customer's like, I'm not paying that. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to pay that. So what do we do? And it's been like that everywhere. Every overseas order that I ship out, I'm having trouble with the amount of customs and taxes. Seems to be, you know, the other end of one of the problems that's going on. So
I thought you were gonna say, what do? I hop on a plane and take it to her, hand
it's
deliver.
actually cheaper. Yeah.
I know, I was gonna say, it's probably
Plus
cheaper.
you get a vacation. You know,
Well, if you ever call a friend, let me know. I'm a pretty good traveler.
okay, got it.
Any thoughts on that from Scott and Todd? I'd open it up, but please feel free to share. Just let me know. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Scott was sharing about creativity is certainly, you know, I mean, everybody's had to do that. And if you don't do that, if you haven't changed, you haven't survived. And, you know, you've seen that a lot in restaurants and, you know, who people are buying from. And Scott talked about 12 people like working to do the buying. And holy cow, that is the situation in every food business, that the buyer is having to spend like enormous amounts of time sourcing ingredients. And, you know, that they refer to the supply chain as anti-fragile, that, you know, the more it gets shaken up, the better it sort of does. It does poorly at first, but gets better. But this shaking is so severe and so fundamental. And, you know, I have a friend of mine, I was visiting with her on Wednesday. I say a friend, but it's actually someone who's deep into the supply chain, who works for Amazon and deals with international logistics. And we were breaking down like some of the problems that even Amazon's experiencing in, you know, how their warehouses are designed haven't been built to accommodate some of these problems. And you're thinking like the most forward-thinking, most flexible warehouses in the world are running into this. And so everybody worldwide is running into it. And, you know, she's really deep too into like heavy manufacturing, has a lot of contacts because of her history in there. And there's also very little sign that it will abate anytime soon. And in fact, some of the problems may become magnified in the coming months. And, you know, that's That's scary, right? For a lot of different people. But I think, being on your toes, switching suppliers, staying ahead of it. I mean, I know when I was talking with Elegant Elephant, they're like, we used to be able to order ingredients like a few days beforehand. And now we have to look 3 weeks ahead of time to make sure we can get stuff. And I'm sure like every food business in this area is going through stuff like that. And that makes it hard to operate your business for sure.
Yeah.
On top of uncertainty.
I see that too. You talk about the restaurants. I can't even imagine having a restaurant business where mine, because I make watches for people, they're always willing to wait. So I can say, oh, you know what, I that's not going to come in until next week, and people will go, okay. But I really feel for the restaurants and what they're going through.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the ones that pivot, I've had restaurants tell me that like in our best times, we did $95,000 a month. And we're now doing, instead of 95,000, we're doing 140,000 a month now. Because they were pivoting, they went to digital menus, they switched their menu up, they made takeaway items. And they're like, and we're actually doing it with less staff. Because people don't always have the same expectations of like, I must be seated and I need someone there in 5 minutes. Like people are kind of getting it. And they've gone, a lot of restaurants has gone to no tip, and that's actually made the restaurant staff happier. I think those restaurants that are like, I'm going to be in the same format, I'm going to do the same thing the same way, and I'm going to keep the same menu items, we're not going to change, are the ones that, have profoundly struggled. Not that anyone intentionally does that, but some restaurants are like made to be more flexible than others. So it's hard.
Scott, here's a question for you. If we go shopping on any given day of the week to Jerry's, we walk into Jerry's, are we going to see the lines that I've experienced in other of your competitor places for checkout? And if so, how are you addressing that? Because you've got the consumer to please on both. They're there to spend some money. They want what they want when they want it. They don't want any hassle. We've gotten so, do I dare use the word spoiled as consumers, that we can get whatever we want when we want it, in store, online. Are you seeing any changes there? And does the workforce shortage come into play and complicate that for you? What are you seeing?
There's a couple of complications. So, as far as the general experience when you come into our store, I mean, we've been working hard to try to make sure that when you come in, you get the same Jerry's experience that you've always gotten.
Okay.
The reality is on supply shortages, people want, for example, you can't get certain brands of caulking right now. You can't get Glidden Paint Company trying to consolidate their branding because they couldn't get raw materials, dropped entire lines of paint that we had in our stores. And we've been scrambling to try to find new paint lines. So if somebody had a favorite brand of paint and all of a sudden they can't get it anymore, they're trying to match an existing paint, it's very frustrating for them. Our team members are trying to work around that. I think for the most part, very few incidences that we have that people are not understanding. I think our customers have been phenomenal. So I think they understand what's going on. I think they're flexing, we're all flexing. And I think they're also doing the same thing. I think it's a tough deal. I wish we get back to the old way because, there's certain molding people use for their house. We can't get certain molding because of raw materials or labor shortages or whatever. But at the same time, I think as far as, I think what is the last thing you said?
I probably don't even remember.
Oh,
I am curious about what are you looking at in terms, you mentioned worker shortages.
Oh yeah.
And we're all kind of watching that. What are you, I don't know, what's on your Christmas wish list in that regard?
All right. So on the worker shortage, that's it. Okay. So Jerry's prides itself in trying to do the training. We hire team members. We have a 500 so people we have working for us year round, our core group of people. And for the most part, we have very little turnover. This last year was different. We had a little bit of turnover in that group, not much. But what was interesting is the ones we hired, the team members we hired part-time and seasonal, which typically is pretty solid through the spring and summer months. were flipping jobs very quickly, and it was very hard to keep, people back, 3 or 4 months. They were flipping jobs, and there's lots of reasons. Pay rates were changing so rapidly. Jerry's is trying to catch up to that, which I think we finally did. But it's one of those things that every day we came in, Taco Bell's raising the rates to $15 an hour, and what are we doing? And we just got to keep pace with that. I think we ended up, because of the high turnover, we ended up with, during our peak business, I think we ended up with some people who weren't necessarily trained to the level that Jerry's would expect them to be. And I think that frustrated some folks, but I think we're going on some initiatives to go back to our world-class training and getting people trained on how to do things. And people are coming to expect us to, if they come in for a service panel, they expect our team members to know how to choose the right service panel, give them all the breakers and the wire and the conduit and all that stuff for it. And we do have people that can do that, and we're getting better at training those individuals who are fairly new. That's been the challenge, I think, this year for us. But other than that, I think, I was worried about this President Biden order, and I was thinking, I want people to be safe. We don't require vaccination cards in our store. We have been doing campaigns to try to encourage people to get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I think people should get vaccinated, just an opinion. But I don't think all of our team members are, and I don't know who is and who isn't. So for us to, the last clinic I had at Jerry's is that I think I had 3 people show up to it. My view is that there's people out there just flat out aren't going to get vaccinated, and there's nothing I can do to change that other than force them to do it. But I'm not going to do that. So I think with being an employer of over 100, I was worried that some of those people were just flat out going to go someplace else. I don't know if that's going to happen now, and we'll see how it goes. I'm still encouraging people to get vaccinated. I think it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest concern about? Is it administrative costs? Is it, I think the mandate as proposed, which is now everyone should be aware, is under appeals and working its way probably through to the Supreme Court for judgment and final decision. But still, we watch at the state level as well to see what might happen from our governor's level. So, but what of that, Scott, of that emergency temporary standard rule that came out from OSHA through the administration, what of that most concerns you? And you mentioned potentially attrition of your.
Well, that is my biggest concern, because the rule doesn't apply to all businesses. And I don't know if businesses should be actually the vehicle to be keeping our, policing this. This is the way I look at it. I think individuals should be held accountable. If the answer is to have a healthy society, which I believe we should have, I think individuals should be held accountable. The problem is Jerry's is not equipped to be a policing agency. We sell home improvements, and we're good at it, but we're not good at requiring team members to present their vaccine cards and make sure that they have a weekly test, a vaccine test. So for me, I don't know if it's the cost that much, Vonnie. I'm not worried about the cost that much. To me, it's about the process. How do we actually make this thing work and hold people accountable under the threat of the fines that they're saying they're going to threaten us with? So to me, that was more of the issue.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Scott. I do believe Todd dropped off. Paige will let me know if he makes it back on just in time for finishing remarks. We're closing in on the last 10 minutes of the program. So I want to be sure I ask this final question posed by one of our attendees, which would be for all 3. And if Todd, you're on there and I can't see you, this is for you too. But short question, best guess on when supply chain issues may return to normal. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Celeste or Scott? Celeste. How's the Duke doing?
Yeah, right. Got to go check with the Duke, see what he thinks about it. I don't see it right away as something that's going to get fixed. It's kind of, what Scott said is really, all of us are facing this, where we wake up every day and we go, well, what's new today? You know, what's going to be the change today? I remember when the pandemic first hit, the rules seemed like they changed every day. The statistics were different every day, and it still is like that, right? The other day I heard, oh, 5 more years of pandemic, 5 more years, you know, and then somebody else says, no, it's 2 years. And I believe that we're going to have supply chain issues as long as we're functioning like that, when we don't know what's going to happen. I don't really have a good grasp on the labor problem that's going on everywhere, right? I don't really understand it. So it's really hard to say what I see with the supply chain, because I feel like I have some big gap in my knowledge or something. I just don't see, it's not clear.
Fair enough.
We believe we belong to a organization, Cleveland Research, out of Cleveland, and they specialize in supply chain issues for really predominantly the home center industry, mostly Lowe's and Depot, and they're monitoring closely that. And so we subscribe to their information. It's expensive, but we supply to it because it gives us an insight what Depot and Lowe's are actually going through, and it helps us adjust to our buying trends. So what we're hearing, like it or not, is that a resin that has to do with anything with plastic, which it's in simple things such as components of faucets and things like that, that resin is going to continue to be in short supply through 2022. The copper prices, as they continue to, they've soared. You know, what used to be a box of 12 to 250 foot wire when I was first starting, it was like $9. Got up to almost $250 this year, something like that. It's still pretty high. I think it's down a bit, but copper is in short supply. We're going to see that through 2022. The trucking issues and anything that's labor related, we're not seeing any signs. The container issues, we're not seeing any signs that that's going to change. So we're budgeting for 2022 to have the supply chain issues to continue all the way through 2020 and probably into 2023.
Mm.
I don't like, but that's the way
Well,
it is.
No. Truth is important to the best of our knowledge. So we're not over this yet. Fortunately, we have some incredible innovators and business, minds and leaders like both of you and Todd, and particularly in our local regional community, that gives us hope, because you're doing some pretty incredible things despite, or maybe because of, the challenges ahead of us. I want to give you, Celeste and Scott, just a few moments to leave us with whatever you wish to leave us with, and before we close out. So take it away. Scott.
Let's Celeste.
Okay,
Go ahead, Celeste.
Celeste first.
Well, I speak from a perspective of being a micro business, about as micro as you can get. And really, what it takes to make it is heart. It has to come from something way down inside of you, why you want to do this, because it's not easy and the rules change all the time, and retail is hardcore. Retail is hard work. And one of the things that I did as far as being creative during this pandemic is that I changed my shop hours to only be open from 10 to 2. And although that sounds like I'm not open at all, I need all that other time to go and work on my website, to work on my store at Amazon, and to work on photography, and to work on my accounting, and to work on design, and all the other things that it takes to make it. So, if I didn't believe in this heart and soul and feel like it was my mission in life, I'm not sure I would do it. And so, if anybody's out there thinking about starting their own business, you just have to really have that voice inside that goes, yeah, this is what I want to do. Because, if you don't have that, it's going to be hard to get up. Very hard to get up because you know you're going to get knocked down. That's my inspiration.
It's
Excellent.
good.
Scott.
Okay, well, let's see. Jerry's, I'll just give you what I think Jerry's is doing. I think we're going to plug along in the local market pretty good. We've been trying to get to, we bought some property in Salem and a few years ago. And we've been trying to plan and get ourselves a third store up in a different market, which has been very challenging. We've the issue really is why we haven't opened. We should have broke ground this year, in fact, but it's not going to happen until we can get a handle on the human resource side of it, the human capital side. We need talented people, and it's going to be very difficult. We need 250 people to run a store, and it's very difficult if you can't get them. So we're holding off until we have assurances, at least confidence in the economy and whatever it's happening in the labor market, that we can get the people we need to run that store. Short of that, Jerry's the other challenge that we've been dealing with, and I'll be brief on this, is that the amount of theft that's going on in our community right now, particularly in our stores, is utterly ridiculous. And it's been very challenging for our management team. And I think we're going to lose something like $2 million this year in theft. And we have homeless camps across the street. And that yesterday, a posse of I don't know if you can say that, but a large group of sheriffs came out and got our products back. But it's they're helping themselves to whatever they want, and the things they're stealing. We have burrito amigos here. They've been broken into almost nightly, stealing their food and stealing their stuff. And it's these are small business people that are just trying to make it. And there's no recourse. They're not doing anything to these people. We've trespassed them multiple times, and they just keep coming back time and time again. So there's not a lot we can do right now. Our managers are exhausted trying to throw these people out and get them out, keep our products and let them leave, because we're not interested in arresting people. We just want them off our property. So we're working hard to try to deal with that on top of the supply chain shortages, on top of the labor shortages and all the other stuff that's going on in our economy.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you once again for staying open for business in both Eugene and Springfield, and being there for our community and doing everything you can to assure that we keep you here. We all appreciate that.
Thank you.
Despite the challenges. And Celeste, you know how we feel about you in downtown Springfield. We just have very much to be grateful for, but particularly for our homegrown local businesses and our entrepreneurs. And for that, I want to encourage everyone on this call, and be sure and encourage your friends and family and neighbors and everybody you know to put local first on your mind. We're heading into the holiday season, and I just want to put a shout out to that. Don't forget to think local first. And Scott, Celeste, it has been a true pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for inviting us. We appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome. And we will be in touch. Thanks for being here, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. If we don't see you before then, have a fulfilling and filling turkey dinner day.
Bye.
Bye now.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.